Welcome to the third part of what is now going to be a four-part series rather than three. This is episode 34 of Chok Muay Chats. I'm joined again by the fabulous Frankie D, but this time we're talking about fighters' mindset. It's a new project that he's working on about fighters' mindset. So, can you tell us a little bit about this new project?
Yeah, look, absolutely. Thanks for the introduction as always. It's glamorous the way you hype me up. For myself, my background, as we've discussed previously, a fighter, then a coach, then a business consultant for these combat sports gym owners. But after some devastating losses in my personal life and in business, I threw myself into my own personal journey and really delved deep into the mental health aspect of things. And I've actually coupled that by studying my master's in counseling as well. I've always had a massive respect and outlook for performance psychology and done a lot of research and coached my
Mm,
own fight in that. But it was something that I discovered that mindset is the difference between success or failure in any endeavor you do in life.
mm.
Like the age-old saying goes, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't beat hard. But when mindset is the missing piece, it doesn't matter because that's what separates the good from the great. Even
Mm.
without the right mindset, even hard work and talent will fall short.
So, how do you train mindset? Because I mean, it's a specific thing we have in Muay Thai. Predominantly a lot of our training is physical, going into the gym, doing two sessions a day or one session a day inside the gym. Then, plus, you've got to do strength and conditioning now. It's pretty much a must-have in your arsenal in terms of professional Muay Thai. Maybe in amateur careers, you don't need to worry about it so much, but as you start to turn professional, certainly need to start thinking about strength and conditioning. Now, that's the physical side of it. How do we actually train ourselves mentally to prepare for the fight game?
Yeah, look, really good question. And what if I told you mental training is just like physical training? You
Mm,
can build confidence, resilience, and focus if you train it properly. And we briefly spoke about this in our last podcast. And I'm going to raise the question again to set the scene because this is one of the most important elements that we need to understand. We asked last time, what percentage of the game do you think is physical? What
mm.
percentage of the fight game do you think is mental?
I remember,
For
I
yourself,
think I think I said 70-30, correct?
perfect. And like we
Mm,
spoke about, amateurs go 50-50, nationals, pros, they talk about 70-30. When you look at the elite, it's 90-10.
mm,
And we've all seen it, during 20 years as myself as a Muay Thai coach at Riddler's Gym in the UK, at my own club in Diesel Gym. I saw fighters at all levels, and I've seen beginners stepping into the ring for the first time, seasoned professionals, world champions, and now within business across all combat sports industries. I've seen incredibly skilled athletes crumble under pressure because they just weren't mentally prepared. And I've also seen fighters, and we've all seen it as well, with much less talent, but an unbreakable mindset that goes so far to achieve great things.
mm,
And when we talk about the split between the mental and the physical, if we're putting 15, 20 hours into the 30% column of the physical that you mentioned, there's no way we can then extrapolate that out and have 70% comparison, which would be like 40, 50 hours.
mm,
What I teach my fighters is your brain, you've got your conscious and your subconscious. And without getting too far into neuroscience and psychology, the conscious mind is the things that we actually think about. The subconscious is the stuff that we've programmed in the background. And the reason most fighters, I would say, do minimal mindset training is when they show up to training, whether it's the strength and conditioning, whether it's their Muay Thai training, they show up, coach tells them to run, they put in their headphones, they start running. Shadow boxing, they're just lost looking in the mirror, flexing. When it's time for pads, they're completely switched off in the zone physically and reacting to what the coach does. Sparring, you're on your game, trying to improve certain small techniques, but literally your brain is switched off and you're working the subconscious. What
mm.
I work with my clients is practicing during the day through visualization and actual mental preparation 10-15 minutes a day. You don't need much more than that. But how to show up to training with your conscious mind on. This
Mm.
is really important. So, for example, when we're running, instead of just running 25 minutes, split it up into 5 rounds. Focus the mantras and the mindsets you're going to have for every round, especially on that final round. If you've got a finish line, visualize that's the end of the fight and you're sprinting the whole way through.
Mm.
When you're on pads, treat it like the fight. Focus on your footwork, focus on your mantra. One of the guys that I'm working with right now, he's got a tendency to show his fatigue. And you
Mm.
know how dangerous that is. You show your fatigue to your opponent, they smell blood, they jump on you. But like I always used to tell my fighters as well, if I can see you're suffering, your mind's given up. You're just reacting to that suffering. So what we're working with him during the day is reprogramming his subconscious consciously by consistently reaffirming the fact that he's going to be strong. No one can move him. Stoic kind of face, no facial expression.
Mm.
So he shows up to training already prepared on how he's going to perform that out.
And it's interesting you talk about the showing of fatigue because it's a really bad habit for a lot of young fighters, especially as they come up through the ranks. Now, in Thailand, in traditional stadium scoring, we know that that is a massive, massive indicator on basically making or breaking a stadium fight. If you show that you're fatigued, it looks really bad to the judges. So
Absolutely.
that's something really worth, thinking about for fighters. That is it's not one of the forefront objectives or outcomes of scoring, but it's certainly a secondary criteria that judges are looking at. If you take a kick and you wince in pain, all right, that shows that your opponent's strike is effective. So
Absolutely.
turning that off, turning the pain over pride, you've got to turn that off and stand strong. So yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that. Um, Now one of the things I wanted to ask you is, do you think there are stages or pillars of success for fighters?
Look, absolutely. Every fighter focuses on the physical training, their skills, their game plan, but the real battle is won or lost in the mind. The fighters
Mm.
who dominate aren't just the strongest or the most technical, and we've seen that throughout all the history of combat sports and all different kind of sporting and even business ventures as well. They're the ones who can control their emotions, stay composed under pressure, and execute their game plan with confidence and clarity. Now, when we talk about the pillars of success, there's three really obvious ones, which everyone spends all their focus and energy on. There's the fourth one, which is paramount. So the first one, physical conditioning. This is without doubt. You
Mm.
need to build the foundations, the strength, the endurance, the speed, the power. Every fighter trains this religiously. Like you said, they've all got strength and conditioning coaches now. They all should be going for their runs, doing their pad rounds. Skill development is the second pillar. And this is where we spend hours and hours, and Muay Thai specifically, where it's the age-old, cliche saying, don't fear a man who's practiced 10,000 kicks once, fear a man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times. That's Muay Thai. Like I always tell people, Muay Thai isn't like boxing or MMA where you got a whole variety of different strikes. Yes, the Thais have a lot of cheeky little sneaky tricks in the clinch, but majority, guys like Yodsin Kai, left cross, left kick.
Mm.
Everyone knew Yodsin Kai was going to throw a left kick and a left cross, but he just had that perfected. Thirdly, which is your coach's role, tactical and strategy. Building fight IQ in you. Some people have it, some don't, but actually being able to read opponents, come up with a game plan, come up with strategy. Now, the fourth pillar, which is the most important and which is what we're talking about, is mental strength.
Mm.
This is the missing piece. Handling pressure, staying composed, pushing through fatigue, bouncing back from setbacks. And what's crazy is the first three pillars won't matter if the fourth one isn't there. And we've seen that time and time again. You've seen killers in the gym step into the ring and absolutely crumble. We've seen fighters at an elite level gas out not because they're out of shape. They're fit. They can run 20 Ks. They can do a marathon. They can do 20 rounds on pads, but because the nerves drain them. We've seen fighters freeze, not because of lack of skill, but because their emotions took over and they go into flight or fight. And you see that, and I always use Saenchai as the perfect example as this, because you can get an elite level fighter step into the ring and look like an amateur flinching when Saenchai starts doing his tricks.
Mm.
You look at most of Saenchai's knockouts, straight elbows, straight knees, straight crosses.
Mm.
But he makes you freak out and open yourself up because he throws random tip-tap shit here and there.
Mm.
Sorry for the swearing. I know you've got to bleep a lot of this out
Nah,
because
that's
of
all
me.
right. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. Now, that's one of the challenges for a lot of fighters is getting past their emotions and basically their mind. Your mind can be your greatest enemy. If I look at my own career, I was so desperate to be a professional, but I didn't want it bad enough. And that was one of my challenges. Also, a string of other related things, but mine was
Yep.
a big challenge to get past. What are some of the most common mindset challenges that you think you find in fighters?
Look, there's a number of ones that come straight away to mind. And I would say one of the most difficult ones, and this is where I'm very passionate about this industry. It's not
Mm,
only, to preface this a little bit, the fighter's mindset is a product that I'm creating that's not only relatable to fighters, it's relatable to mental health overall. And
mm,
I want to categorize it a lot to do with men just because that's the industry that I'm going to be specializing in. But this application with the fighter's mindset about building up not only motivation, discipline, and purpose in your life, but then also being able to reframe and have compassion and kindness to yourself is
mm,
such a crucial part. And on that point, one of the biggest things that I see affecting the fighters and their mindset and people in general in this space is self-doubt and imposter syndrome.
mm,
What if I'm not good enough? What if I get exposed? What if I don't belong here? Self-doubt is one of the biggest enemies of a fighter's confidence. Imposter syndrome, I'm sure we've all heard about that, that
mm.
feeling of being a fraud, that you don't deserve this spot, can show up in training, in fight camps, and in the ring.
And what about dealing with losses? Because that's a thing that every Muay Thai fighter will deal with. It doesn't matter if you get to pick and choose your opponents, like some people get to, because they like to take the easy route, but records are for DJs, and we know that we know that we deal with losses in Muay Thai. It's just a fact. Everyone's going to lose at some point. You're not going to be top dog forever. So how do you deal with losses and setbacks?
Look, losses, and again, this is why I love the application of a
Mm,
fighter's mindset in life. Losses is part of fighting, unless you do boxing. But we'll compare it right now for Muay Thai, because in Muay Thai, we get creditation, we get reputation
mm,
based on who we fight and how hard we fight, not what your record is.
mm,
And life is about that as well. If you want to go through life with an unbroken record and just win, then you've just had too easy of a life and you've never really achieved anything.
mm,
So losses can either make you or break you, and it depends on how you frame the situation. If you can look at a loss as a way to improve yourself, if you can look at a loss as an all-out war that you had and you laid everything on the table, and a lot of this comes to the preparation and the mindset that you go into the ring with, then a loss is just nothing but another lesson and a training session for yourself.
mm,
I've always said it, and I would always tell my fighters and the clients nowadays, and people that I go through in business life, the losses that allow you to continue fighting and go through another day are going to be the best lessons for yourself and are going to take you closer to bigger victories as well.
mm,
Now, the problem with a loss, and this is the real difficult thing, because as motivational as what I just said is, at the end of the day, we're human. And a
mm,
loss can feel like a personal failure. And one of the psychology methods that I always go to that was really powerful for myself is called internal family systems. And the short version of it is we all have different parts in us. So, for example, there's a part of me that feels confident in some situations. There's a part of me that doesn't feel confident in all other situations. You've got these different personalities inside of you. One personality that's prevalent in all of us and is quite prominent in a lot of fighters is our ego. Now,
Mm.
without delving too much again into psychology, your ego is the character you show the world, and it's an identity that you try to protect to hold yourself up.
Mm.
So the loss can feel like failure to the ego. And you
Mm.
need to acknowledge that. You can't ignore that. We all have that ego, we all have that element. What you need to do, and this is where mental training and mindset is so crucial, is I teach my fighters and my clients and everyone that I work with that what we're doing is not about the wins or the losses. It's about creating the best version of yourself. I recently worked with Buddy Holland, who was going for a rematch for his WBC title. And
Mm.
a week before the fight, we'd reached his mindset to a stage where he was like, it doesn't matter if I win or lose. The man I've become today to allow me to now reach this stage, I'm
Mm.
so fucking proud of that that belt is just going to be a benefit.
Mm.
Who I am today is the best version of myself. He went in, crushed that fight, fourth round finish, dominated. And if
Mm.
you look at his persona, his energy, his walkout in between rounds, his fight between his first match against Mark and his second match against Mark,
Mm.
miles apart. And this is what becomes so important that yes, our ego gets hurt. Yes, we might have a little sook, but if you separate your self-worth from the external, your wins, your losses,
Mm.
and you base it on the internal, that I showed up the best version of myself and I simply fought a better opponent on the night, then it allows you to get back to training and back onto the mission for your next fight.
And yeah, it's really interesting you say that, being the best version of yourself. And I find that you have to be the best version of yourself in training as well, not just in the fight. But one of the challenges that fighters can have is not developing, well, they hit a stagnate in their development as a fighter physically and hitting a plateau. How do people overcome plateaus in training?
Look, this is one of those old cliches that it's all about the journey, not the destination.
Mm.
So one of the really important parts is you got to separate what your long-term goals and achievements is into daily practices and processes.
Mm.
And this is why a lot of people hit that plateau because it becomes repetitive. When you first start training to when you first fight, you change massively. Then you have these huge increments in change between each fight as an amateur. Then is when it becomes normal. Then is when your body adapts. Then is when your life becomes difficult because now a year, 2 years in the game is when the real difficulty comes in.
Mm.
So what you want to start doing is, again, this is where mental training is so important and it's applicable to all of life. You need to have a daily game plan and approach based on how you prepare yourself mentally to show up physically.
Mm.
We want to turn around, and I applied this to the concept of men, but fighters and everyone in general. Happiness is not what we should be achieving. Wins is not what we should be achieving. What you want to be aiming towards is reaching the end of the day and feeling proud. Proud of what the work you've put in, proud of the development. And the problem is without mindset training, without being conscious in your thinking, you're just going through the motions every day. You're waking up, getting from A to B, doing X, Y, Z, going to sleep, and then it becomes into autoplay. And some of the fighters I worked with, like one of the guys, Cody, I was working with today, and one of Riddler's boys is on Rebellion coming up soon. He's had 23 fights. And when we spoke about let's rewind and have this version of you today speak to that first timer 5 years ago
Mm.
and tell him what you've achieved until now, do you think it would even be believable? There was no way. Like you
Mm.
think of the stuff to achieve in this sport. Like I remember myself looking down at the beginner's Muay Thai class and thinking, when will I be fit enough to do that?
Mm,
And then all of a sudden, what you achieve becomes normal. This is where daily, and I know this sounds real like woo woo and soft, but daily gratitude, daily reflection, actually looking at your achievements and what you've done, one foot in gratitude, one foot in growth. That's
mm.
what keeps you present. And a lot of mindset training isn't woo-woo stuff sitting there meditating like a monk on a mountain and getting superpowers. It's simply about being conscious and present in the moment.
And I suppose it's one of those things that takes consistency, just like training, it takes consistency, but a lot of people struggle with consistency and motivation because it goes in waves. Sometimes the spark of inspiration and motivation will come in waves. How do you deal with struggling with consistency and motivation?
Yeah, cool. So this is one of those things that when you hear all of the alpha movement toxic shit that's out there on social media,
Mm,
they're like, oh, gotta show up, motivation doesn't matter, it's never enough, rah, rah. A lot of that stuff I agree with in a certain element
mm,
because it's absolutely true. Discipline is more important than motivation. Absolutely. But one of the most important elements to this, and you've got to do this from a very calm and compassionate level for yourself, is discover what your true why is.
mm,
Why are you, like, really, why are you doing this? And if you go back to what I was mentioning before regarding the different parts, for a lot of us, when we're unconscious in our behavior,
mm,
why we're doing it is for our ego. We think winning that belt, winning that championship, getting that money, getting that car, getting all these external things is going to bring us happiness and joy.
mm,
Whereas truthfully, building that best version of yourself where you can show up every single day and be proud, that's the fuel that drives the discipline. Then you have some good days where you're motivated, and those are the days where you really want to be conscious and enjoy it because that shit comes rare. But really diving in deep to your why, that then fuels the discipline. Because if
mm.
you're doing a David Goggins and your discipline is just based on pure hatred inside of yourself, what's the point? I would rather eat chocolate cake. You know what I mean? Like, I look at David Goggins and I'm like, that poor guy needs a hug. Like, he
His whole thing is, I don't want to be fat again. Who's gonna carry the boat?
who's gonna carry the boat? I'm like, bro, what boat? Like,
Yeah.
chill. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Uh,
and unfortunately, what ends up happening in Muay Thai is generally there's a real tough man mentality in there.
mm,
There's a real competition of egos out there, and it's becoming a lot better now because the sport's becoming a lot more professional. And there's people like yourself, me, everyone out
mm,
there that's really promoting the healthy elements of this sport. And
mm,
again, I refer back to life and mental health, and I always refer it back to men because I understand men, not women.
mm, mm,
And for a lot of us, your drive, your discipline, and this is where I went wrong. If it comes from an unhealthy foundation, it burns out and it destroys you. No one can look at David Goggins and go, man, I wish I lived his life. You look at the high achievers, and I always refer to this, Tony Robbins.
mm,
You look at Tony Robbins, the guy's like pulled through 9 billion in sales last year. He's a CEO of 150 companies, has fed something like 15 million homeless people.
mm,
Like, yeah, he's got drive, he's got motivation, he's doing huge things, but it's heart centered. He
mm.
wakes up every morning, does his ice baths and goes for his runs. And, like, you need to really find the fuel of why you're doing it. For a lot of athletes, once you pull away from the ego and it's to create that best version of themselves where they're proud of, then the
Mm.
external doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's interesting the whole why you're doing this. You know, it's probably a big thing about mindset training in general is it's just generally overlooked. I mean, I think a lot of young guys are very scared to look at themselves in the mirror and are scared to open what's in Pandora's box inside of here. Why do you think mindset training is so overlooked in combat sports?
Because Muay Thai is still very much considered to be an old school tough man sport.
Hmm.
So a lot of these guys just don't get it, but it's not that it's overlooked. And I want to reframe this because as I've started doing these seminars, I've reached out to all the big gyms. So I've got like 5 or 6 in Melbourne. I've got a few in Sydney, a few in Queensland, loads in Perth that I'm going to be going and doing over the next couple of months.
Yep.
And every single one of the coaches that I talk to, old school and new school, they're like, oh my God, fuck yeah, our team needs it. Like, I send them a message, bro, I'm doing this. Are you guys keen? They're like, yep, please, let's do it.
Mm,
The problem is there's not enough help out there for mental health for high achievers. And I really struggled with this. So when I was going through a lot of problems in my 30s and in my 20s, I'd go see psychologists, which were predominantly women,
mm,
and they were very compassionate and kind, but they just didn't understand me. They just wanted me to keep talking about my problems without providing any kind of solution or help towards me.
mm,
Started looking towards men, and either you had the toxic alpha Andrew Tate model, or you had some hippie in a man bun hugging a tree in Bali. And I'm like, neither of these two apply for me. There's not enough real specific type of help. And I'll take this back to the business coaching for Muay Thai. You go get a normal business coach, they look at our business model and they completely tear it apart. And the same thing applies to when you go and look at a psychologist or mental health specialist when it comes to our sport. What a lot of people don't realize is, someone once asked me a long time ago, what makes a great fighter? And I was like, trauma. And
mm,
back then I said it jokingly, like the demons inside of you is what
mm,
fuels you fighting. But I realized over years that's the defining factor between fighters and athletes.
mm,
Athletes do it love of the sport and ego, a prize, the money, the fame, the glory. Fighters, especially Muay Thai fighters, do it to silence the demons in their head.
mm,
And once you do that, it doesn't matter where you achieve or what you achieve in life. You either leave the sport more broken because you weren't able to accomplish anything successful, which reinforced your demons, or you become one of these fighters that never retire because you don't know how to live a life without fighting. There hasn't been enough specific helping, and this is why I'm so excited to get involved in this space because I really feel the combination of performance coaching
mhm.
along with some compassion and kindness and self-awareness and consciousness is really going to help these individuals not only in the sport but in their life as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really important thing, especially as we learn more about the brain and the impact of our sport on the brain, and supplements as well that can help brain recovery, but also the
Yep.
science actually behind looking at ourselves and being able to achieve more through training our brains this way and looking at the psychology. So I think what we'll do is we'll wrap this episode and we might have to continue on another one because I'm sure there's a lot more to talk about in the
There's a
next episode.
lot more to talk about, man. This is what I get excited about. So absolutely.
And this one is episode 34 of Chok Muay Chats, here with the main man, Frankie D, talking about fighters' mindset training, a new project that he's working on to help fighters get over certain struggles that they might be finding in their training, hurdles like motivation, hurdles, nerves in the ring, which hits everybody, absolutely hits everyone. So make sure to check it out and also go and check him out on Instagram, the Fight Business Coach.
Yep,
Uh,
and the fighter's mindset will be launched within the next few weeks as an official Instagram page as well.
awesome, awesome. I will put everything in the description below. This is Chok Moya Chats, episode 34. Like, subscribe, find it on YouTube, Spotify. It'll be out very, very soon.